Hi folks, welcome to channel trailer number 15. This is the explanation of where the dark matter is. And you can see by the title, it's not a case of where it exists, it's a case of when it exists. And that's the critical difference between the ethereal mechanics explanation and the mainstream explanation. Okay, I'm going to show you that the dark matter is actually real matter that existed hundreds of thousands to millions of years ago. Okay, and we'll get into that. But that's this simple explanation because that means it's real matter. It just went away, and we'll explain how it could go away. Now, so you understand where this fits. This is an early release of the ethereal mechanics paper called Electrogravity. This is obviously a teaser because I need more people. I need more time, and I want to do this full time. And if I can get more Patreon folks to get me to the point where I can do this full time, I can get this paper done faster. Right now, the expected release of Electrogravity has been pushed back to probably Thanksgiving or maybe even the Christmas holidays. There's just so much work. And what I may even have to do, because the paper's getting so much bigger with so many cool and new things, I may have to split the paper up into two separate releases. Just so I can, and part of this video is to show my Patreon folks that have been holding on, and I keep pushing the paper back, that there is fantastic things being released in this paper. And this is one of them. And this is a simple one that if physicists decide that they're going to steal this idea and publish it as their own, they will not be able to do it without the remainder of ethereal mechanics. But this is such a simple explanation that a 5-year-old will understand it. Okay, so let's get into it. So in this paper, I'm going to show an alternative explanation to dark matter, which is much simpler than the mainstream explanation. And it does not require gravitational waves to propagate instantaneously, which the mainstream solution requires. Okay, but first, before we get into the proper explanation, let's explain why scientists came up with this dark matter nonsense. In other words, it was invented to solve a phenomenon that they couldn't explain with regular gravity. And what that is in galaxies, okay, you have the stars rotating around the core of the galaxy. And according to normal physics, that the stars, as you get farther away from the core of the galaxy, the velocity of those stars should decrease at using this phenomenon right here, according to this graph here. Okay, but when scientists actually go and measure the stars seem to have the same velocity from a certain distance from the core, pretty much all the way out to the edge of the galaxy. This violates what they believe to be the proper mechanism of gravity. And so so let's go into this a little bit. So what they did is they decided, well, that means in order for the stars out here to be going faster, they must be under more gravity than they normally would, because this would be what the normal effect would be. So if these guys are up here, it means that there's much more mass somewhere that they can't account for. Now let's go into some equations. Okay, this is an equation developed in the ethereal mechanics that explains the velocity of planets around a central mass like a star. And we showed that this follows the planet's actual orbits in our solar system. And we can actually use this now, because if we actually plot this for a galactic core at galactic distances, then according to even ethereal mechanics model, that should be the behavior of the stars going out to the core of the galaxy. This red line on top of the dotted line, okay, so from a certain distance, this model, okay, is valid for galaxies too. Okay, the difference is because a galaxy isn't a point source. It's like the core is a whole bunch of stars and things like that. That as you get closer toward the core, this model diverges from the real. Okay, so this is a good approximation for us to look at the stars at a certain distance out. And because this is a simpler model, it's easy for us to use. Okay, and this model shows basically that after you get a certain distance from the core, basically the core can be treated like a point mass, and the core dominates the behavior of the galaxy, or should dominate the behavior of the stars as you get farther out. So therefore, from this distance out to here, we can actually use this model to understand what's going on. This model was developed in the Ethereal Mechanics video series somewhere between 21 and 28. Those videos are still pretty much valid to Ethereal Mechanics. A lot of other videos have been made obsolete or whatever. These mostly are intact. I haven't looked at them all to see if they're all intact with the new stuff, but they are pretty much intact for mostly of what's going forward. So again, the core dominates the behavior of the outer stars. Okay, so the way mainstream science decided to go about this is they said, well, if we increase the mass, then we can raise up this red line and get this point here. If we add more and more mass, we can get this point here. Okay, but the problem is that means this point here is going to be above the B, and this point here is going to be even farther above. And so they're left with this really strange situation now where you have to have a different mass for stars out here, a different mass for stars out here, a smaller mass for stars out here. And so you'll find that your mass the mass needed to get these stars to be unaligned decreases as you get closer toward the core. So that's weird. It's not like you have one distribution of mass. And that's why I tried to do simulation of this a while back, and it was like I couldn't really find a distribution of mass using normal models that would make things go flat. You had to actually put weird things in there that said, you know, the particular bundles of mass only affect the outer stars, but they don't affect the inner stars. You'd have to come up with all kinds of weird, strange rules that didn't make any sense. Okay, so what we have to consider now is that galaxies are as much as 50,000 light years from center to the edge. And if we consider that gravity does not travel instantaneously, the model I showed you before, okay, is the model that I use for planetary systems. And in the planetary systems, the propagation of gravity is fast enough that you can pretty much ignore its propagation. But at a galactic level, you can't. Gravity cannot travel faster than the speed of light. So at the very least, the stars at the edges of the galaxies are under the effect of the core that existed 50,000 years ago. Now it's probably longer because I'm pretty sure that gravity does not travel at the speed of light. It's got to be something less than the speed of light. At least the effects that are predicted by this model here cannot go faster than the speed of light, and it has to be some fraction of the speed of light. Don't know what it is right now, but I know that it has to be a smaller value than the speed of the light. So therefore, the stars out here could be under the effect of the core that existed 50,000, possibly to 1,000,000 years ago. We don't know until we know the velocity at which this effect propagates out. Because this one does not account for propagation effects. And you can see that this matched what the physicists have. So that means the physicists are still using models where gravity propagates instantaneously, just like this one does. But again, like I said, this was developed for planetary systems where the propagation of gravity is sufficient that you can treat it as a static system. Okay, so we have to count for propagation delay. That means that for this model to work here, it means that the core was much, much heavier, and those gravitational effects propagate out, and the core must be losing mass over time. We're going the opposite way of physicists now. We're doing reciprocal thinking. The physicists are trying to add mass to solve the problem. I'm removing mass to solve the problem. So if the core is losing mass, that means that would explain why you need more mass here. You got more effective mass here, less here, less here, even less here. And that would explain the way that you could get the stars to rotate at the same speed is because as the mass depletes, these stars are always under a heavier core than the stars right next to it and the stars right next to it. And that would give you the quote-unquote mass distribution. Not really the mass distribution, but the effects as if these stars are under more mass than these stars, and then these stars, and then these stars. I hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so now where does the mass go? Well, I mean, stars give off light, right? So if stars give off light, we got some E equals mc squared stuff going on. So let's do a engineering back of the napkins calculation. Okay, so let's just take our star, the sun. On the Earth's surface, on a bright sunny day, the amount of power that hits on a good day is 1 kilowatt per square meter. Now, granted, I'm not accounting for the fact that the atmosphere is going to take away some of that power. That's okay. That doesn't really matter. As you see, it doesn't matter how much we compensate. We're never going to have enough power. Well, let me just go through the numbers. Okay. So if we take that the Earth is 93 million miles away, that works out to this many meters. Okay, then we find out what is the surface area of that sphere at the Earth. That's 4 pi r squared, and that works out to a surface area of a sphere that's 2.827 times 10 to the 23 square meters. The total watts would be 1,000 watts times the surface area, which would be 2.827 times 10 to the 26 watts. And a watt is a joule per second. So what's the number of seconds in 50,000 years? Well, that's 3,600 seconds an hour, 24 hours in a day, times 365 days in a year, times 50,000 years, and that's 1.6 times 10 to the 12th seconds. So the total joules that the sun loses in the total joules that the sun emits in 50,000 years would be the number of seconds in 50,000 years times the total watts. And that works out to 4.64 times 10 to the 38 joules. Okay, so what's the total mass loss? Well, we take E equals mc squared and solve for m, and we plug in the joules here and the speed of light squared here, and we end up with 5 times 10 to the 21 kilograms in 50,000 years. So the sun is 2 times 10 to the 30 kilograms. So a loss in 50,000 years as a percent is 5.21 divided by 2e30. And that's 2.5 times 10 to the minus 7%, which works out to 2.5 parts per billion. Okay, 2.5 parts per billion, okay, is pretty much irrelevant over 50,000 years. This is not enough to explain the amount of mass that would be required to be lost to give you a nice uniform star rotation as it propagates out. Okay, this is nowhere near in the ballpark. That's why I was saying before that it doesn't really matter if you account for the atmospheric effects. We're nowhere near in the ballpark here for the amount of mass loss in the sun to account for the mass loss. And the other thing that would be interesting, this mass loss would go on throughout the galaxy, not just the core. And so everything would balance out. This would have zero effect, and we could not explain the effect with this. So what have we learned? The light emissions are not sufficient to explain this phenomenon. Even if we concluded that gravity travels 1/10 the speed of light, in other words, to give more time for mass to be lost using this phenomenon, this could not account for the required mass loss in the core. Okay, so but there is a way that stars can be gobbled up such that gravity is removed, and that would be black holes. This is my rendition of a black hole sucking in the ether. It's just, I'm having fun with my Photoshop here. And so what happens is every galaxy has black holes, and the black holes are sucking in the stars in the core. And one thing that ethereal mechanics teaches us is that galaxies, when they first form, have a bright haze in the middle. This haze is billions and billions and billions of stars. And because these stars are not caught in the irrotational vortex, where this vortex here that it forms actually stabilizes these stars and keeps them in the orbit. Because these stars are in random orbits around the core, they are eventually going to lose and be sucked into and become sucked into the black holes. And over time, you're going to see this core diminish. And what ethereal mechanics says, this is a young galaxy because it has a big, bright, hazy core. And over time, that core is going to diminish, and it's actually going to lose its spiral arms. The spiral arms are going to mix up, and it's going to look more like rings. And you're going to see, because the core is losing mass, the inner stars are going to shift out, and you're going to have this kind of dead zone here. So the stars that are close are going to be sucked in. The other stars that are far enough away are just going to mitigate out because the core is losing mass. So this would be an older galaxy. I couldn't find a picture, but in the end state of a galaxy, it should look pretty much like a hurricane where there's no core at all. As a matter of fact, it's just going to be an eye like this. a much darker eye at the center. Not necessarily the black hole event horizon, just a lack of stars. Because you may not even see the black hole, the massive, supermassive black hole that's forming there. Okay, so that is now the amount of, what mainstream scientists would say, oh, well, a black hole is just going to make the core more massive as the force. No. What's different in ethereal mechanics is when the black hole is not a gateway to another universe. It's basically nature's way of storing matter in an inert fashion. Okay, a black hole is a storage vessel for inert matter. Matter that falls into a black hole is stored in such a low energy state that it emits no fields, not gravity, well, not none, but very, very little. Very, very little electric field, magnetic field, gravitational field. So that these stars are pretty much removed from the gravitational footprint of the core when they fall into the black hole. Okay, so in a wrap-up, the outer stars are under the effect of a more massive core that existed thousands to millions of years ago. The halo of stars in the galactic core that are not part of the stabilizing effect of the galactic plane, the irrotational vortex, will quickly fall prey to the core black holes. The black holes are nature's long-term storage vessels for matter. Matter is stored in such a low energy state such that field emissions are essentially zero. This sequestering of matter at the galactic core is the only means known at this time to remove mass at a fast enough rate to affect the star velocities as observed. The two unknowns we have at this time is how fast are the cores losing mass? In other words, how quickly are black holes gobbling up that halo of stars? And the other one we don't know is how fast does gravitational changes propagate outward? Obviously, it can't be faster than the speed of light. So far, I don't think it's anywhere near the speed of light, but I don't have the exact numbers yet. That's still work in progress here. Okay, and we've got to give credit to the rule of acquisition 29, the reciprocal thinking imperative. And rule of acquisition 29.0 is humans usually get stuff backwards before they get it right. If you watch the video from rule of acquisition 29, this is still in the version 3 series. I show you a lot of things that humans got that they got it backwards before they got it right. So humans' first attempt here is to come up by explaining the stars by adding mass to a galaxy, the quote-unquote dark matter. Okay, but this, again, does not resolve the mystery very well. And this explanation is inconsistent with observed phenomena because the dark matter has never been found. Okay, if you need additional matter to explain your theory and you cannot find that matter within a reasonable time, I don't know what the reasonable time is, you must start considering that you've got something wrong. And one of the easiest things to do, according to the rules of acquisition, is flip it on its end. Is there a way to resolve the mystery by removing mass instead? So in other words, the inner stars are under the effect of less mass than the outer stars. Okay, and this answer actually explains the behaviors of the stars because the missing matter is actually matter that has gone dark. It's gotten sucked into black holes. And it's real matter that just got sequestered. Okay, and coupled with this, the explanation dovetails with the consideration that gravity is a field that must propagate, which means that the inner stars are under the effect of the near-term core, which is lighter, and the outer stars are under the effect of the core that existed 50,000 to a million years ago, depending on how fast things propagate, then this fits with normal science. It's not a fantasticism. It's pretty mundane. Okay, and this, this gives us the means to quantify the propagation of gravity once the rate of mass sequestering is known. That is something that could probably be measured over a big enough time. So how does this video relate to the rest of ethereal mechanics? This is an early release of the paper titled Ethereal Mechanics Electrogravity. In electrogravity, I show that the gravitational force and the inertial force and the induction force are all the same thing. Okay, if you've been following me in the ethereal mechanics on the Patreon site, you've been following the videos over the years, then you know exactly where everything is going. Things are pretty much what I predicted in the early video series. Of course, we have corrections and modifications as we learn where certain theories are wrong. We improve them just like any scientist. We're going to get stuff wrong. Okay, but we correct stuff and we go on. We don't sit there and hold on to these ancient, obsolete ideas. Okay, we're not here to defend some kind of dogma or canonical belief in things. I'm here to get observations and explanations of the universe that fit observation and that are reasonable, that obey the rules of acquisition. And of course, we just like regular science, we don't believe in over unity. We don't believe, you can watch the video on fantasticisms, that's all in there. Now, for an earlier version of the stuff contained in the electrogravity paper, the 20-year-old paper New Gravity, which is copyrighted, so no one can say that they invented this stuff. It's 20 years ago. Go to stupidity.com and search for, you can search for, I may not have a link for it on the first page, but if you go into the ethereal mechanics link, you'll find the thing for electrogravity, and then there should be the legacy paper should be listed there. If you want to understand where new electromagnetism comes from, because new electromagnetism, the new induction model, is part of the electrogravity model, you can see the Foundation Series playlist, which is at the YouTube site. Just find the playlist Foundation Series. There's also links to it on the distinti.com website under Foundation Series. Okay, this, if you want to see the older EMV series of videos, which was my earlier, dumping of ethereal mechanics. That is found in the EMV series of videos. Some of the videos are a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I wasn't very mature when I made them, so I might be a little more of an asshole than I am now. Or I don't know, maybe I'm more of an asshole now. I'm sorry for the language. But essentially, most of the stuff in the video series are right on exactly what I still believe. Certain things have been improved. Most of the stuff that has changed, I've changed the language. Like in the early days, we called pretons, we called them massless charged particle. But massless charged particle is an oxymoron. So now they're inertialess charged particles. And we called them binary mass particles. We call them second order systems of pretons. So basically, the ideas are the same. We just improved the language of what we call stuff. If you want to see one of the newer released ethereal mechanics, there's the ethereal mechanics transvariance paper at the distinti.com website. In there are links to YouTube videos which show the animations that show that physicists did not properly model the Michelson-Morley experiment. There are more things that need to be accounted for, not just time dilation, not just length contraction. There are issues with reflections. There are issues with a lot of other things. And when you get through doing all that, you find out this spooky thing called time dilation is not the dilation of time. It's the dilation of material processes. Time is a constant. Our perception of time is really what changes. Our clocks change. But time doesn't change. It's the clocks that change. Okay, and clocks are basically our perception of time. Anyway, that's it for now. Listen, I need help. I'm trying to do this after doing a full-time job. I would love to do this full-time. And if I can get more Patreon folks to start giving, donations and get the donation rate up, I can pretty much leave my full-time job and do this full-time. I only pretty much get the weekends to work on this, and it's really, I'm not taking care of other things like exercising and all that other stuff. I really need, this stuff is very important because like I say in the T1 trailer, okay, this stuff does explain that faster than light starships are definitely going to be in our future and that 1,000 times the speed of light is going to be low gear. And if you read the T1, T2, and T3 trailers, okay, which are in the same playlist, you're going to find out that we have to develop faster than light starships if we're going to survive. So even if you only want to donate, $2 to $4 a month just because you believe that we must do this, that's a supporter level. $5 or more, you become a passenger and you get to see all of the videos that are technology related. And there's a lot of things I release only to Patreon folks. I don't release to the YouTube channel. And there's higher levels than that where you get access to software, you get access to voting on how we go, yada, yada, yada. And I have a lot of great patrons that have stood by me. I even have patrons that are engineers that are helping offload some of the work as far as, the designing stuff and double checking my math in cases. And it's been a really cool project, and I'd love to do this full time. And because it's not just fun for me, it's really what we need to save the human race. And not only save the human race, to save the ecosystem of the Earth, because if the population of the planet keeps growing, we're basically going to eat the ecosystem and poop it out our butthole. Okay, so we need to take the ecosystem and start moving plants and animals to other planets, start terraforming, because the only other option for sustainability of humanity on this planet is the Agenda 21 option, and they're talking about 75 to 90% population reduction. Now, how do you do that unless you have a purge? Okay, so the Distinti solution is the only solution. It's get starships and start moving people and plants and animals off and start seeding other planets. So I think it's well worth it. I mean, it's a lot less than paying for a porn site, your monthly fee for the porn site. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much.